Joseph Fritzl, the man who held his daughter captive in an underground prison for 24 years. Joseph Fritzl was an engineer that lived in Austria, and before all of this went down, he was known as a hardworking, smart man that made good money. He was raised by his mother and grandmother. His mom was abusive to him. She would beat him, leave him alone for a long period of time. When he was a teenage boy, he became a peeping Tom, and he would start looking into people's windows trying to see women naked. In 1956, he met his wife at a cafe he was working at. His wife's first impression of Joseph was that he was a very kind man. Later on, he was known to be really controlling and possessive. In 1967, after being with his wife for 11 years, he was arrested for RAPE with a knife. He followed a young mom home, waited until she fell asleep, broke into her home, S8'd her with the child in her bed, and he was arrested, sentenced to 18 months in prison, but only served 12. During his time in prison, his wife visited the whole time and was almost supportive to him. I don't know about the law now, but the law back then was that after 15 years of any crime, your record was wiped clean. So in early 1980s, his record was clear and clean. At this point, everyone in his neighborhood and everyone that knew him in the public had a lot of respect for him. He was just this wealthy, great guy that did a lot of work in real estate. Him and his wife went on to have 7 kids, 5 girls, and 2 boys. Joseph ends up buying a house that almost looks like a hotel, and he lives there with his family and his 7 kids, and then he rents out some rooms to tenants. So outside of his house, and everyone that knows him thinks that he is this really great guy who has it all, but inside of his house, everyone is terrified of him. It's said that as soon as he would step foot in the house, all the kids would be silent, and he would beat them up if they did anything wrong or were too loud. Joseph starts growing a weird obsession for his 4th child. Her name is Elizabeth Fritzl, and when she was 11 years old, he started sneaking into her room and assaulting her. He basically had her attached to his hip and would request for her to be there whenever he needed help with anything. All of Elizabeth's friends at school and neighbors would say that she was a really kind, sweet girl, but they did start noticing that she was kind of being detached and started being a little more quiet. She would just sit there and stare out the window. Joseph is constantly going into her room and abusing her now. He starts exposing himself to her, leaving dirty magazines under her pillow, and just doing all kinds of weird stuff. In 1978, Joseph decides that he wants to build a cellar underground underneath his house. He gets a permit and starts building. He tells his family that this is going to be a bomb shelter, but nobody is allowed down there. He refers to the cellar as his kingdom, and he would spend hours working in the cellar, but said it was his space and only his. As Elizabeth starts to grow up, she starts sneaking out and doing things to try and rebel. Joseph starts freaking out, and he's on edge because he realizes that he's losing control over her because she's growing up. In January 1983, Elizabeth tried to run away. The cops found her. They called her dad to come pick her up, and Joseph tells her that he is never going to let her run away again. In August 28, 1984, Joseph lures his 18-year-old daughter into a cellar. He puts a chloroform rag on her face and covers her face until she passes out. When she wakes up, she's very confused, and there's barely any light in the cellar. She is handcuffed and can't move. She was extremely confused. Her dad just locked her in a cellar, and she stayed in the dark cellar for a long time. He would bring her food and eventually made a leash so she could move around and use the bathroom. Back upstairs, everyone is looking for her. Joseph makes Elizabeth write a note saying that she has run away and she's joining a cult. She's an adult and doesn't want to be found. The mom is freaking out. Joseph is pretending to also be freaking out. He even cries to the police, pretending that he is concerned for his daughter. They report this to the police. The police say because of her history of running away and sneaking out, this is normal behavior for her. And then Joseph eventually makes Elizabeth out to be this troubled child who ran away. Police end up closing the case a few days later. Days turn into weeks, weeks turn into months, and months turn into 24 years. Joseph would go down to the cellar every day to plan out his day for work. Remember, he's an engineer, so his family and wife just thought that he was down there drawing up plans and projects for work, when in reality, he was down there torturing his daughter, abusing her, forcing himself onto her, and then leaving her alone for the rest of the day, and his wife never batted an eye. After 5 years of Elizabeth being down there locked in the cellar, she is 23 years old and she is pregnant. She tells Joseph, her father, that she needs to go to the doctor. He says absolutely not and doesn't give her anything but a dirty pair of scissors, a towel, and a pregnancy book. She ends up delivering the baby all of her own down there in the cellar with nothing but a dirty pair of scissors, and she ends up delivering a total of 7 babies. When Elizabeth was 26, she gave birth to her 3rd child. And in May of 1993, Elizabeth's mom found a cardboard box on her front porch with a baby and a note inside. Obviously, the box was placed there by Joseph, and I don't think he did that because he was trying to be nice. I think he did that because the cellar was getting too crowded. The note in the box was addressed from Elizabeth, and it said that this was her kid and that she just couldn't take care of it. This gave Elizabeth's mom hope that she was alive, and she took the baby in and raised it. She raised the baby, her grandchild, with Joseph, completely unaware that Joseph was the father. About a year later, Elizabeth is 27 and her fourth child shows up on the porch as well. 2 years after that, another kid shows up in a basket on the porch. All 7 of Elizabeth's children were born alive. One sadly died shortly after he was born. He was born with respiratory issues, and she told Joseph that he needed to get medical help. Joseph refused to get help, so he passed away. Joseph put his little body in a furnace and it was burned. He then proceeded to take the baby's ashes and scatter them around his backyard. So at this point, 3 kids are living upstairs being raised by the grandma and the father, and 3 kids are being held captive in the basement with Elizabeth. Joseph would use the children to manipulate Elizabeth, so it almost felt like he was gaining control because he would use the kids against Elizabeth to threaten her. Meanwhile, Elizabeth's siblings upstairs are living a completely normal life, even going on family vacations. The floor plan of the cellar was eventually expanded. I believe Joseph added a little kitchen and a bathroom in there, and he would walk down there to his workshop. He had to go through a few doors to get to the area where he was keeping them all captive. And the tenants that lived upstairs, because there are still tenants living upstairs, later on went on to say that they did hear noises in the basement, but they would ask Joseph about them and he would just blame it on a new surface or a new boiler. Elizabeth did her best to raise the kids in the cellar. She would teach them to read and write, and she would tell them all about sunshine and grass and rain. In 2008, Elizabeth is now 42 years old. Her kids that are living upstairs, the 3 kids, they are now teenagers. And the youngest kid in the basement with her is 5-year-old, and her firstborn is now 19 years old. The 19-year-old, including all other kids that are down there with Elizabeth, have never stepped a foot outside, and that spring the 19-year-old got incredibly ill and she needed medical attention. For the first time ever, Joseph agreed to get help, not out of the goodness of his heart, but because he was probably panicking about what he would have to do if he had to get rid of a 19-year-old body. In April 19th, the 19-year-old daughter and Joseph go to the hospital and she is put on life support. His story is that his missing daughter had just left the 19-year-old there with him, and he did make Elizabeth write a note saying this. The medical staff start assessing the situation and they become suspicious because it's clear that the 19-year-old girl has never seen a doctor in her life and there is no paperwork or medical history on her. She just kind of appeared out of nowhere. They contact the police and the police put out a public appeal for Joseph's missing daughter to come forward and provide any medical records because the 19-year-old girl is now in a coma. Meanwhile, the police request to get DNA from all family members because they figured if they can't find the 19-year-old girl's mother, they can maybe find her father. When they were asking to get the DNA test, Joseph was conveniently always busy, and this just made the cops more suspicious. In a panic, Joseph releases Elizabeth and the 2 children from the cellar after 24 years of being held captive. He's obviously pretending like he doesn't know anything. He just tells his wife that she finally must have decided to come home. Elizabeth begs Joseph to take her to the hospital, so he does. The medical staff calls the police to report that she is there. When police saw Elizabeth, they said that her skin was so pale and sickly, it was almost translucent. Joseph is arrested immediately, and Elizabeth at first refuses to say anything until she's promised that she never has to see him again, and then she finally breaks. All 6 children get DNA tests, and it's confirmed that they are all the children of Elizabeth and her father. It was later reported that the investigators and the law enforcement that went down to the cellar needed therapy just from looking at the cellar because it was horrible and that traumatizing just to see. In 2009, Joseph was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole in 2024. And somehow new psychiatric reports have just ruled that he is no longer a threat to society. I know that earlier this year, his lawyer applied for an early release from jail on the grounds of old age and dementia. The last update that I could find is from earlier this year in January. He was granted conditional release from a prison for the mentally ill to a normal cell, eventually hoping to be transferred into a nursing home. The children all have new identities and are living with Elizabeth in an undisclosed location in Austria, only known as Village X. I didn't have time to express my own personal opinions because this video would have been 2 hours long, but I cannot wait to talk about this case in the comments with you guys. It was absolutely horrifying, disgusting, disturbing, all of the above, and I'm excited to chat about it in the comments.